Chapter 138. Madame D didn't expect that Qin Huaiyong would be alerted by her act of smashing a room full of porcelain. Qin Huaiyong looked at the porcelain on the floor, and then looked at the antique shelf that was still standing there neatly. There was not even a trace of movement on the floor. How could Qin Huaiyong not understand? His eyes were burning with anger, and without another word, he turned around and left. What did she mean by accidentally bumping into the antique shelf? It was obvious that Madame D hated Madame Shui for being pregnant, so she made such a scene. General. Madame D panicked. She suddenly stood up and rushed out. Qin Huaiyong suddenly stopped and turned around. He looked at Madame D fiercely and said, "Whether you are happy or not, if anything happens to the child in Ruolin's belly, you will be the first one to blame." General. Madame D held the door frame and didn't dare to take another step. She suddenly covered her face and burst into tears. "General, how could you say such a thing? Although I am a little uncomfortable, how could I hurt Sister Shui? If I didn't hurt my body when I gave birth to Yuru, I wouldn't only have Yuru now." Qin Huaiyong also knew that Madame D had a difficult labor when she gave birth to Qin Yuru. It was not easy for Qin Yuru to be born. She also hurt her body, so it would be difficult for her to get pregnant again. Madam, don't be sad. General was just saying. He didn't really doubt you. Don't cry." Nanny Zhou ran over to help Madame D up. She peeped at Qin Huaiyong and said softly, "Life in General's mansion wasn't very good at that time. Madam, your body was not well. Otherwise, such a thing wouldn't have happened. General is very kind. He never blamed you for so many years." She meant that the reason why Madame D couldn't get pregnant was because of Qin Huaiyong. Qin Huaiyong looked coldly at Madame D, who was crying. He didn't say anything for a while. After standing still for a while, he finally turned around and left. Seeing Qin Huaiyong standing there, Mrs. Qin, who had some hope, cried and fell to the ground. Nanny, how could he do this to me? I hurt my body because of him. He used to say that he didn't care about children, but why did he do this to me now?" "Madam, don't be sad. The general just forgot the past for a while. He still cares about you. Otherwise, he wouldn't come to see you." Nanny Zhou held Madame D tightly and winked at the maid, Maya. Maya understood and came over to help her bring Madame D into the inner room. After Madame D was settled on the bed, Nanny Zhou said in a low voice, "Madam, don't cry. I feel strange. I've been gone for a while. Why haven't you cleaned this place? You even had a conflict with the deputy steward. Don't you know that the deputy steward works for the general?" Nanny Zhou suspected that someone was stirring up trouble here. When she left, she told Madame to stay here and not to stir up trouble at this time. "I just want to exchange for a batch of presentable porcelain. They sent me all the junk that others don't want. If people see this, I will lose my face." Madame D wiped her tears and said with hatred, "Did Madame call the deputy steward yourself?" Nanny Zhou asked helplessly. "If I didn't call him, he wouldn't give me a good one." "My good madam, why are you still making trouble at this time? If something really happens to Madame Shui, the general will definitely suspect you." Nanny Zhou said. "That won't do. This bastard can't be allowed to stay." Madame D gritted her teeth and said with hatred, "Madam, you must be more careful during this time and be more kind to Madame Shui. This is not before Madame Shui is pregnant. If you really hurt Madame Shui, the general will definitely not let you go." Nanny Zhou pointed outside and hinted, "Wait for the banquet." "Okay, then wait for the banquet." Madame D fiercely narrowed her eyes and her eyes were cold. Even if she didn't attend the banquet, she could cooperate with her sister-in-law to give Shui Ruolin an accident. In Fengyang, the accident that happened in the Marquis's mansion couldn't be blamed on her. "Madam, do you still need the people over there?" Nanny Zhou felt that they still had to be prepared. She reminded Madame D and pointed in a direction. The people over there happened to be entering the capital city. Madame D had already contacted the people over there under Nanny Zhou's reminder. Both of them hit it off. Yes, they are taking the Imperial examination and will enter the capital city. It's a waste not to use them. Shui Ruolin wants to be the madam of Qin's mansion peacefully. She doesn't know how clean she is. Madame D sneered and said, "It's just a little more money. But don't act rashly. Wait until Shui Rulin comes back from the banquet of the Marquis's mansion of Fengyang alive." "Yes, I understand. I will send someone to tell her tomorrow." Nanny Zhou understood tacitly. Qin Wanru followed Shui Rulin to the street market in the capital city early the next morning. Last time when she went to Huaguang Temple, she and Shui Rulin walked on the road in a hurry without stopping. The weather was good. Both of them were in the mood now. They simply parked the carriage on a street and took a few people with them to walk along the crowd casually. They walked on a main road in the capital city. There were many people. Qin Wanru not only took Yujie but also Nanny Dong. Nanny Dong liked a shop, and Qin Wanru happened to want to see it herself, so she took Nanny Dong out. A group of people walked and stopped along the way. They talked and laughed, so they didn't feel that time passed very fast. Neither Shui Rulin nor Qin Wanru wore a curtain hat. Qin Wanru looked like a child. Shui Rulin had never worn a curtain hat and had the habit of dropping her veil. There were many misses from aristocratic families coming and going on the street. There were not many people wearing veils. Therefore, they were not conspicuous. Walking to the door of a tea house, Shui Rulin reached out to touch her belly. She had walked a lot along the way and she was really tired. Qin Wanru looked at the door number and said to Shui Rulin, "Mother, you go up and have a rest first. I will go to a few more shops to see the place that Nanny Dong chose for me." "I'd better go with you," Shui Rulin said with a little worry. "Mother, I'm really fine. Besides, Nanny Dong is here. You can have a rest here first." Qin Wanru refused with a smile. "If something happens, send someone to call me." Shui Rulin was still a little worried. She told her a few more words and then took her into the tea house. Qin Wanru followed Nanny Dong and continued to move forward. After walking for a short distance, they saw a shop in front of them. The shop was not big and it was also an embroidery workshop. However, it looked deserted and few people came in and out. It was completely different from the prosperous shops they had seen along the way. The plaque at the door was also dusty and dirty. It seemed that no one had cleaned it for a long time. At first glance, it made people unhappy. "Miss, this is the shop. I've asked about it. I heard that the owner of this shop is going to leave the capital city. He said that something happened at home and the business here is going to be closed." Nanny Dong pointed to the shop and said. Qin Wanru looked around. There were also some shops on the left and right, and there was even a restaurant on the side. It was a 3-story restaurant. The guests coming and going were either rich or noble. They were all dressed in bright clothes and ostentatiously passed by. However, no one stopped to look at this shop. In such a prosperous area, the owner of this shop opened a shop like this. Did he really not want to do business? "Let's go in and have a look," Qin Wanru said and walked into the shop. After entering the door, she saw that there were a lot of goods in the shop. Many brocades were piled on the board in disorder. At first glance, she could tell that they were not good things. Several women were looking through the brocades, and they did not look at those brocades that were obviously much cheaper than those in other shops. After looking through a few times, they shook their heads and left. "Miss, they are all women from ordinary families. Even if these brocades are the best, they are not suitable for them. Even if some of them are greedy and buy some for cheap, the quantity is very small." Nanny Dong observed several women coming and going and whispered in Qin Wanru's ear. Qin Wanru withdrew her eyes from those women and nodded. There were not many shop assistants in the shop. There were only 3, and they all looked a little old. They were not very smart, and she didn't know if it was because of the slow business. They all looked a little lazy. "Second miss, there are more upstairs." Nanny Dong pointed up and said. Qin Wanru saw a small staircase in an inconspicuous corner. She walked over and stepped on the wooden steps. Because it was in the corner, it felt a little gray. When she went up to the second floor, she felt that there was some light again. However, because the window was not big, it seemed too narrow and a little stuffy. There were some accessories on the second floor, which were some very common toggle and loop buttons, embroidery and so on. She didn't know if it was because the light upstairs was not very good, but it looked gray and very inconspicuous. There were a few scattered chairs by the window, which seemed to be intended for people to sit down and have a look. A lot of embroidery was piled up in the form of a pile of rubbish, which was really not a pleasing place. "Second miss, please wait a moment. I'll go and invite them over," Nanny Dong said. Qin Wanru decided to meet the owner of this shop before she came today. Nanny Dong also went out yesterday and told this matter to the supervisor here. "Okay." Qin Wanru nodded, picked up a piece of embroidery from the ground, and put it in the window to look at. In fact, it was very beautiful embroidery. It was not only exquisite, but also made of good materials. The sunlight fell on the embroidery from the window, as if it was plated with a layer of light gold, which was extremely gorgeous. Something seemed to flash in her mind, but she couldn't grasp it for a while. Qin Wanru frowned slightly, thought for a while, put down the embroidery at hand, and picked up a pair of embroidery to look at. "Miss, this embroidery is so beautiful." Yujia also took one and looked at it with Qin Wanru. She used to live in Jingxin Monastery and usually saw the gray monk's robe. At this time, when she saw such exquisite and beautiful embroidery, she immediately liked it and couldn't help sighing with emotion. "It's fine. Miss, I think this is the most beautiful embroidery I've seen. How many have you seen in the monastery before?" Qin Wanru laughed and handed the other embroidery in her hand to Yujia. "Look at it, which one looks better?" "Miss, you can't look down on me. Although I haven't worn it myself, I've seen it. There were many pilgrims in Jingxin Monastery at that time, and many misses and madams wore very gorgeous clothes." Yujia took it and pouted, and then compared it. She took out the one she had seen before and said with certainty, "Miss, this one looks better." Chapter 139. Nanny Dong came over with two people. Walking in front was a little old man who looked like a steward. Following behind him was a young man dressed in white, his appearance extraordinary and elegant. He was tall and straight like a slender bamboo. What was most noticeable about him was his pair of handsome eyes, which were smiling, revealing a kind of elegance and gentleness that came from his bones. But inexplicably, she felt that he should not be underestimated. Different from the harmless elegance that Chu Luchan occasionally hinted, he looked more leisurely, and his heart should be more tranquil. When there was a smile in his starry eyes, it always made people feel warm. Most of the warmth she felt after she came to the capital city in her last life was given by him. But it was also because of him that she became a widow, and finally became an abandoned woman who was driven out of Deputy Prime Minister's mansion. If Chi Baiyu did not recommend her to be a painter in the palace and draw pictures for the beauties, she would not be able to return to her maiden family, and her husband's family would not take her in. Finally, she could only live on the street. But even so, Qin Wanru was still grateful to him. At least in the few months when he was alive, he treated her very well. He taught her medicine, taught her how to raise a swallow, taught her how to let go of the knot in her heart, and taught her how to smile slowly. However, all of this disappeared after he died. This person had brought her a warm light, but it had completely disappeared with his death. After that, she was miserably chased out of the left minister's residence. Why was she chased out? That part of her memory was very vague. Some things in her past life seemed to be blocked by something. She could never remember them, and it seemed that she was reprimanded because of her color. Subconsciously, she reached out to touch her head, which was dull and painful, very uncomfortable. She was very grateful to him, and also hoped that she could save him before he got hurt. This was even her original intention of learning medicine. In her last life, he was both a teacher and a friend. How could she not be excited when she saw him again in this life? "Excuse me, miss, are you the one who wants to buy the shop?" When Shichi stood in front of Qin Wanru and said with a gentle smile. Although there was a little surprise in his eyes, he still smiled politely. He didn't ignore Qin Wanru because of her small age. He also glanced at her overly delicate face calmly and alienated. "You're so young." When she finally calmed down, Qin Wanru stood up and bowed deeply to Wen Shichi respectfully. She raised her pale little face and smiled brightly. It was beautiful and brilliant. "That's right. Please sit." When Shichi looked at Qin Wanru curiously, looked her up and down, and then reached out his hand to gesture with a smile. Although she was young, she was calm and delicate. Although her face looked pale at this time, with her fresh cherry lips, she was inexplicably stunning. One could imagine how stunning a girl like her would be when she grew up. What was even rarer was that she was so outstanding. Even her slightly raised eyebrows had a natural charm, but her appearance was decent and steady. At first glance, one could tell that she came from a well-educated aristocratic family. Her brilliant smile, without a trace of scheming, inexplicably made people feel good about her. As the youngest son of Prime Minister Zhou, Wenxiqi had seen many misses from aristocratic families, but it seemed that no one was as eye-catching as her. "Child, are you going to sell this shop?" Qin Wanru suppressed the shock in her heart and said slowly. In her last life, she did not know that Wenxiqi had such a shop. However, she really did not know anything except for Wenxiqi, who entered Prime Minister's mansion in the name of marriage. Otherwise, she would not be driven out of the house in the end. When she married into the family, Wenxiqi had been bedridden and could not get up. He rarely woke up every day, and then he did not wake up for several days and nights. In the end, he did not live long and died at a young age. To Qin Wanru, he was more like a brother. When he was awake, he took good care of Qin Wanru. When he taught Qin Wanru, he was gentle and kind, and he never gave her a hard time because she didn't understand. He was born smart and quick-witted. Compared with him, Qin Wanru was far behind him. Even so, he never called her stupid. His illness was caused by falling into the water. Qin Wanru asked Wang Feng to find him that day. She must think of a way to remind him to pay attention to that couple. She must not let him die early, although he was smarter than others, like in her last life. She bit her lip, and a trace of tears flashed in her eyes. Her bright and beautiful eyes became more and more attractive. Wenxiqi looked at Qin Wanru in surprise. He felt that the miss in front of him seemed to be very excited to see him. She looked like she was about to cry. Her small cherry lips were tightly pressed together. Although she suppressed all her emotions, there was a trace of thick ink rolling in her beautiful eyes, and her beautiful eyes were wet. Had he seen this miss before? Wenxiqi denied it after thinking for a while. It was impossible for him to have seen this Mississippi. If he had seen this miss before, it was impossible for him not to have an impression of such an outstanding girl. "It's not me. It's a friend of mine. He happened to have something to do and asked me to negotiate the price with you, Mississippi." Wenxiqi smiled gently and said, "I heard that we have talked about the price yesterday. What do you think, miss?" Nanny Dong did ask about the price yesterday. Today, Qin Wanru came to see the shop before making a decision. How to deal with the brocade and embroidery inside. Qin Wanru composed herself and said slowly. She casually picked up the embroidery at her feet. Wenxiqi was very smart. She could not let him see anything. "If you want, of course, we can also deal with them together." Wenxiqi smiled and said, "Can't we share the shop together?" Qin Wanru asked with a smile. When she raised her head again, all the emotions in her eyes had been restrained. "No, these brocades and embroideries are excellent. It's just that the store hasn't been tidied up properly, and we haven't come up with a reasonable way to attract customers. That's why this place is deserted. My friend doesn't care about the business of the store, so the good things have been reduced to this state." Wenxiqi said unhurriedly, "Didn't you say you want to go back to your hometown?" Qin Wanru blinked her big bright eyes and asked in confusion. "Originally, I planned to return to my hometown, but then I decided not to go. However, my friend doesn't like this kind of embroidery shop. Since someone wants it, I want to sell it. That's why the price is so low. Originally, I planned to sell it after a period of time. Since your subordinate asked me, I naturally told him my intention." Wenxiqi said with a smile and explained the cause and effect in a few words. So, it was not only cheap, but also coincidental. Looking at the embroidery all over the floor, Qin Wanru really felt it was a pity. Maybe the shop was run by a man and he didn't care about these goods, so he didn't manage them well, so the shop could not be opened. She was very envious of the embroidery and brocade in front of her. Since he planned to open such a shop, he naturally needed to buy a batch of brocade and embroidery. In fact, it was best to sell them together with the shop. Then, can we not pay for them together? Qin Wanru counted the money she had at hand and found that she didn't have so much money. It was enough to pay for one shop, and there would be some circulating funds later. However, if she wanted to buy such a batch of goods, she would be a little short of money. However, she didn't want to bother Madame Dowager and her mother. The mansion was also looking for a shop, and Madame Dowager and her mother didn't have much circulating funds. No. The price is very low. My friend naturally wants to sell them together. Even if it is cheaper, at least it will save a lot of trouble. When Shichi said with a smile. Qin Wanru bit her lower lip, and a layer of white appeared on her pink lips. Her beautiful eyes fell somewhere in the air, and it could be seen that she was thinking about the feasibility of this plan. When Shichi's eyes fell on her face again. When Qin Wanru looked at him just now, he was embarrassed to look back at her. Now that Qin Wanru was in a trance, he could see her face more clearly. The girl in front of him was indeed extremely beautiful. Her delicate facial features carried a hint of childishness, and it was hard to describe in painting or calligraphy. She was very much like those floating and agile beauties in ancient books, but she was brighter and more beautiful than them. Childishness, otherworldly, and charm seemed to be intertwined in her body, which made people couldn't help but look at her a few more times. She was really a beautiful girl. With pure appreciation, when Shichi looked at Qin Wanru a few more times, and then he lowered his eyes politely with a smile on his face. If his close friends saw that he would secretly look at a girl one day, they might be surprised and teased. His close friends all said that if he continued to be like this, he could directly become a monk. If you really don't have money, there is a bank across the street, and you can mortgage the shop. When he raised his head again, when Shichi smiled gently again. His words reminded Qin Wanru. Her eyes lit up, and her tightly biting lips relaxed. She rolled her watery eyes and said, "Okay, then it's settled. I will pay for the shop first, and then buy the things in the shop with the money I get from the mortgage. But because it is a one-time payment, you can buy the things in the shop to me at half price. In this way, your friend can be saved from trouble, right?" But when Shichi suddenly felt very appreciative of the girl in front of him, so he agreed casually. Originally, he only thought that she was beautiful, but he didn't expect that she was so smart and decisive. She could grasp the weaknesses revealed in other people's words when talking, and hit the nail on the head, so people had to consider her proposal. If it was a man, he couldn't help but make friends with him. Unfortunately, it was a woman. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said, "Then 5 days later, I will come to buy the shop with money, but I still have to trouble you. I don't know if you can be my guarantor, so that I can raise money faster." She was not familiar with the people and the place in the capital, and it was not so easy to mortgage the shop. In fact, she didn't know much about the twists and turns in it, but she knew that if when Shichi could be her guarantor, the effect would be faster and better. When Shichi frowned. He originally wanted to refuse, but when he saw the pair of dark watery eyes, he froze for a moment and raised his handsome eyebrows. In fact, he was not very willing to do it, but he couldn't bring himself to say it when he looked into her eyes. If you really can't find anyone else, I can ask my friend to be your guarantor." When Shichi said slowly. He never liked to meddle in other people's business, so it was best to ask his friend to do it. What if he doesn't want to?" Qin Wanru asked eagerly. "If he doesn't want to, I will be your guarantor." When Shichi thought for a while and said indifferently, but it could be seen that he was reluctant. "Thank you, child. May I know your name?" Qin Wanru stood up happily and bowed slightly to Wen Shichi. When she raised her head again, there was a bright smile in her eyes. At that moment, the smile touched the calm heart of the teenager. Chapter 140. Why did he find it difficult to refuse her? He even had the idea that they should know each other? When Shichi clearly realized that this feeling was definitely not love at first sight. After all, she was still too young, and his heart had always been calm. Even the abbot of the temple said that with his state of mind, he could directly become a monk. But why did he have a feeling of déjà vu? He nodded silently, and his eyes under his handsome eyebrows became deep. When Qin Wanru went back to find Shui Ruolin had rested for a while. Seeing that it was almost time, they didn't go back to the mansion. Instead, they went out of the tea house and found a restaurant to have lunch outside. A waiter had been waiting at the door for a long time. Seeing them coming, he was very perceptive and hurried upstairs. They found a private room by the window and enjoyed the scenery while enjoying the scenery, which was very comfortable. Qin Wanru had met Wen Shiqi and forced him to be her guarantor, so she was relieved. At least they knew each other now. When she asked him to pay attention to those two people in the future, she could also implicitly say it. As long as she found a suitable time to say it, he would not die young again in this life. With his talent and learning, if it were not for his illness, he would definitely be able to compete in the court and become a dragon or phoenix among men. With her worries gone, she looked much more relaxed. After eating a little, she stopped eating and leaned on the window to watch the fun. The window was hung with gauze, so people could not see the inside from the outside, but they could see the scenery outside from the inside. Although it was a little hazy, it was still very attractive to the misses from aristocratic families. In the last life, Qin Wanru almost didn't go out. On the one hand, people gossiped about her wherever she went. On the other hand, she became more and more self-abased and almost couldn't raise her head in front of others. Every time she went out, she would be ridiculed and ridiculed. Even the misses who were close to her deliberately ridiculed her in front of others. In this life, when she went to the streets of the capital, she could lean on the window to watch the scenery outside. Not only did she dare to come out, but she also took the initiative to come out. Shui Ruolin ate a little slowly. Seeing Qin Wanru leaning on the window, she felt funny and pitiful. She put down the chopsticks in her hand and her eyes turned red. This child was so happy to watch the fun. In fact, she was just at the age to watch the fun. "Mother, if you're done, let's go back." Hearing the voice behind her, Qin Wanru turned around and saw Shui Ruolin wiping her mouth. She turned around from the chair and sat down obediently. If it weren't for her bright eyes, he wouldn't have believed that the young girl sitting in front of him was the one who had been so rude as to lean against the window. "Let's watch for a while longer," Shui Ruolin said with a smile. "Mother, I'm tired. Let's go back." Qin Wanru came over, held Shui Ruolin's hand, and shook it gently. "Well, I will take you out next time." Shui Ruolin knew that she was afraid that she would be tired, so she took Qin Wanru's hand and promised. "Thank you, mother." Qin Wanru nodded with a smile. They came out of the private room and were about to go downstairs when they suddenly heard a young man's voice. "Second Miss Qin?" Qin Wanru subconsciously looked back and saw Chu Liuxin coming out of the private room next to her. She couldn't help but be stunned, but after bowing to him sideways, she followed Shui Ruolin obediently and walked downstairs with the help of her servant girl. She didn't stop at all. Chu Liuxin stretched out his hand and blinked his eyes, looking very innocent. "Prince Exayan, which family's daughter is she from? She is so beautiful." Several teenagers who came with him also saw the scene in front of them. They looked at Chu Liuxin and then at Qin Wanru's back and became curious. "Although she is beautiful, she is so small." Someone said. "She is so small. She looks less than 10 years old, but she is very polite. Which family's daughter is she from?" All the teenagers were very curious. Some of them didn't see her just now and deliberately stretched their necks to look out. But at this time, Qin Wanru and Shui Ruolin had already gone far away. Chu Liuxin was a little unhappy. He felt that at least when he was in Jiangzhou, he and Qin Wanru were familiar friends. How could they see her without saying hello? It was so rude. "Let's go." Chu Liuxin turned around angrily. He was in a bad mood and didn't want to talk. He squinted at the teenagers who followed him, shook his feet and went downstairs. When he saw this girl next time, he must scare her. Let's see if she dared not to give him face in front of so many people. Early the next morning, Yujie woke Qin Wanru up early. After breakfast and freshening up, she took Yujie to Madame Dowager's yard. Madame Dowager had finished her breakfast, and Shui Ruolin was accompanying her. When she saw Qin Wanru coming, she specially waved her hand and repeatedly told Qin Wanru to take good care of Shui Ruolin and be careful not to be pushed by others. As for going out to meet guests for the first time, she should be more decent. She must not make mistakes and make people laugh at her. Madame Dowager also repeatedly told her about all kinds of things. She was afraid that something would happen to them. Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin agreed one by one, and then they said goodbye to Madame Dowager and went out. The carriage had already been prepared. It was the best carriage in the mansion, which was specially prepared for Madame Dowager. At this time, it was specially given to Shui Rulin and Qin Wanru. The cushion inside was soft, and it was very comfortable to sit on. Qin Wanru helped Shui Rulin to lie down, and then sat down. When she was about to let them go, she suddenly heard Yu Jia whispering, "Miss, I just saw Mei Shui beside First Mississippi. It seems that she has been looking at us for a long time." A sharp light flashed in Qin Wanru's eyes, but she didn't show it on her face. She smiled slightly and signaled Yu Jia not to say more. With Qin Yuru's temperament, how could she be willing? First Miss, Second Miss and Madame Shui went to a banquet. "I heard that it is a banquet in and Great Elder Princess's mansion." After inquiring about it, Mei Shui hurriedly ran back and reported to Qin Yuru as soon as she entered the room. "A banquet in and Great Elder Princess's mansion?" Qin Yuru stood up in surprise. "Yes, it is and Great Elder Princess's mansion. It is said that Great Elder Princess sent an invitation card to Second Miss and Madame Shui." Mei Shui covered her chest and gasped. How dare they go by themselves? Qin Yuru only felt angry and wronged in her chest. She was so angry that her face turned green. She reached out to press her desk, gritted her teeth, and said, "Prepare the carriage to go to Duke Yong's mansion." As the elder sister, she didn't go, but let Qin Wanru go. How would others think of her? No, she had to go with them. "Yes, I will tell them right away." Mei Shui nodded, hesitated, and asked, "Do you want to report to Madam?" Qin Yuru shook her head decisively, turned to sit in front of the dressing table, and told Min, "Dress me up and let others see who is the most distinguished and beautiful miss in our Qin's mansion. How can a little girl compare with me?" She was the first Miss Qin at the right age. Qin Wanru, a little girl who hadn't even grown up, wanted to climb over her head. She didn't know whether she was qualified or not. She wanted to let Qin Wanru see that even in and Great Elder Princess's mansion, she was still the first miss who could suppress her. From Qin's mansion to and Great Elder Princess's mansion, they had to pass through several busy streets. Qin Wanru looked all the way with interest and didn't feel bored. When Shui Rulin leaned against the window and closed her eyes to rest, she looked at the street outside with relish through the light gauze of the window. When they arrived at the place, they still wanted to see more. In Great Elder Princess was the Emperor's aunt, and her mansion occupied a large area. It was even faintly comparable to Prince Chen's mansion that Qin Wanru saw that day. There were many carriages in front of the mansion, and it could be seen that there were many womenfolk who came to Great Elder Princess's mansion today. There were 3 doors in and Great Elder Princess's mansion. The side doors on the left and right sides and the main door in the middle were wide open, but everyone basically went through the side doors. There were not many people who could let and Great Elder Princess open the main door. They were all respected old madams or some members of the royal family. The carriage of Qin's mansion entered the door on the left together with the other carriages. As soon as they entered the door, they saw an old maid squeezing through the carriages with a smile. After looking at the carriage of Qin's mansion, she asked the coachman, "Is this the carriage of Qin's mansion?" "Yes, it is." The coachman put down the whip in his hand and said respectfully, even if she was just an ordinary old maid, she was still the old maid of and Great Elder Princess's mansion, and he, a coachman of Qin's mansion, couldn't afford to offend her. "Please come with me. Our Great Elder Princess has already ordered Second Miss Qin and Madame Shui to go to the side," the old maid said with a smile. She looked very gentle and didn't mean to take advantage of and Great Elder Princess's influence. She seemed to be a good person, which made the coachman of Qin's mansion feel a little relieved. An ordinary coachman was still a little flustered in the face of such a royal princess's mansion. "Follow this nanny." After receiving Qin Wanru's order, Yu Jia lifted the curtain and said. Then she smiled at the old maid in the carriage, which could be regarded as a greeting. After the old maid took the carriage of Qin's mansion around a few turns, they came to a parking lot. There were only a few carriages parked here, but it was not the place that was full of carriages and almost couldn't park anymore. When the carriage stopped, Qin Wanru and Shui Ruolin came down one after another. The old maid was originally curious about what kind of miss could make her great elder princess keep thinking about her. She even specially ordered herself to park the carriage of Qin's mansion in a better place. At this time, when she saw Qin Wanru, she couldn't help but secretly praise in her heart. This miss was really beautiful, with a sweet smile and a little cute. She was a miss who made people feel comfortable just by looking at her. Madame Shui, second Miss Qin, please come with me. The old maid smiled and led the way in front. Qin Wanru held Shui Ruolin's hand and followed behind. Along the way, the scenery was excellent. Looking at the scenery in front of them, it was really the place of the royal family. Everything was exquisite, which was very pleasing to the eye. Along the way, there seemed to be more people, and it could be seen that they were all walking inside. Qin Wanru and Shui Ruolin slowly mixed in the crowd and walked inside with a group of womenfolk. Chapter 141. Qin Yuru came here with Countess Yong. On the way, she met several Mrs. Bosom friends and their brothers, and the group became bigger and bigger. Qin Wanru also walked and looked carefully. In addition to the womenfolk, she also saw several handsome childs. There was no formal banquet, and there were many people talking in twos and threes. Her long eyelashes fluttered. Looking at the scene in front of her, she understood that not only the womenfolk were invited to the banquet, but also the men. However, they were all young men and childs. She didn't know who received the male guests in Great Elder Princess's mansion. It was said that and Great Elder Princess's mansion was the only master now, and there was no man outside to take care of the male guests. First Miss Qin, I heard that your sister is here. Is it true? Someone asked Qin Yuru. When Qin Yuru was in the capital city, she also knew several misses. Now that they came together, everyone was curious. Of course it's true. It's impossible to leave her in Jiangzhou. After all, she has to go to the capital city. Qin Yuru said vaguely, looking a little embarrassed. It seemed that she wanted to explain for Qin Wanru, but she didn't know where to start. You are too kind. You even speak for her. She has done such a thing. Someone sneered. Yes. She can't stay in Jiangzhou anymore. She has to go to the capital city. Is there anyone in the capital city who can marry her? She really thinks that the noble aristocratic family in the capital city will marry her. Another person said disdainfully, and his face was full of contempt. Qin Wanru stopped, blinked her watery eyes twice, and stopped moving forward. Shui Ruolin also heard these words, and her face darkened. She wanted to raise her leg, but was stopped by Qin Wanru. Seeing that both of them stopped, the old maid of and Great Elder Princess's mansion also stopped and stood aside to serve them. Just now, the old maid in charge repeatedly told her that the second miss of Qin's mansion was very popular with Great Elder Princess, and she must remember not to look down on her because she was small and weak. Of course, she also heard the words next to her. She curiously looked at several misses who were talking enthusiastically and several young childs beside them, and decided to stand quietly. Will the son of an aristocratic family in the capital marry her? One moment she wants to marry this man, the next moment she wants to marry that man. Does she think she's playing house? It was a young man who raised his eyebrows and said disdainfully. Then he pushed Di Yan aside and said, "Child Di, don't you think so?" Di Yan's eyes flickered, but he didn't reply. He just smiled. Hey, Di Yan, when did you become so reserved? Even if she is your relative, you can't help such a woman. If this kind of woman was in the capital, she would be drowned in a pig cage. The onlookers thought that Di Yan couldn't speak harshly because of the relationship between the two families, so someone teased him. Don't talk about cousin. Cousin doesn't know anything. Actually, I don't know either. It's just some bad rumors. Mother told me not to talk nonsense. My second sister is actually pretty good. Qin Yuru explained for Qin Wanru with a gentle face, as if she really wanted to help Qin Wanru wholeheartedly. As he spoke, he revealed an anxious look on his face as he looked left and right. What's wrong? Are you afraid that your sister will see it? A young lady of Duke Yong tugged at her sleeve and said discontentedly, What are you afraid of? Even if your grandmother loves your sister, so what? You are the eldest daughter of the legal wife, And your sister is such a shameless bitch. My second sister is not such a person. Chin Yuru seemed to be exposed and said reluctantly. However, her explanation was met with a burst of laughter. Everyone felt that her second sister was very shameless. Although it was just a simple rumor, it could be heard that this second miss was a bitch. Big sister, are you talking about me? Hearing this, Chin Wanru let go of Shui Ruolin's hand, took a few steps forward, came behind Chin Yuru, and said with a smile. Some people had already guessed which mansion such an exquisite girl came from when they saw her coming. Why had they never seen such a beautiful miss in their own mansion? However, when they saw her standing behind Chin Yuru and saying such a sentence, the people who were gossiping just now were immediately stunned. Everyone looked at the girl in front of them in astonishment. The first impression they had of her was that she was small, very small, and looked less than 10 years old. She was far from the delicate bitch in their imagination. After that, she was as beautiful as a glass doll, but she was even more lively than a glass doll. Her jet black eyes seemed to be soaked in clear water, and when they moved slightly, one could almost see their own reflection. Her cherry lips were small and red, revealing a color that was different from other women's. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, making people feel that she was more exquisite. But even so, everyone was very clear that she was just a child in front of them. She was only as tall as Chin Yuru's shoulder. Her palm-sized face looked a little childish, and her earrings swayed. She looked dignified and elegant, but it still made everyone clearly realize that the person in front of them was just a child who had not grown up. A child? Unexpectedly, she was just a child. Was she really the debauched second Miss Chin who would snatch her sister's marriage and then go back on her word and not want to marry her? Why didn't anyone tell them that second Miss Chin was actually still a child? What did she know? Big sister, what did you say about me just now? Chin Wanru looked at Chin Yuru with a smile, slightly tilting her head, which made her look a little naive, and made those who had said bad things about her feel a little embarrassed. Such a young child, how could she do that kind of thing? I was talking about you with other misses. Chin Yuru was startled by Chin Wanru's sudden appearance, but she also knew that she would meet Chin Wanru, so she immediately calmed down and said, Am I very famous? I just arrived in the capital. Chin Wanru blinked her long eyelashes, hesitated for a moment, and said, Under her long eyelashes, her white and tender skin was like snow. As soon as she said this, several misses around immediately turned their eyes to Chin Yuru. They were all smart people, and the biggest reason why they were so unfriendly to Chin Yuru was that some rumors about Chin Wanru had been secretly spread to their ears, and then they shared them. Some of the rumors about Chin Wanru were accidentally revealed by Chin Yuru, and some were inquired by misses from Chin Yuru's servant girls and old maids out of curiosity. At this time, if Chin Wanru was a young girl who had just become charming, they would also believe that these words were true. After all, these words were not told by Chin Yuru herself, but they deliberately inquired from Chin Yuru. But the problem was that Chin Wanru was just a child, a seemingly naive and ignorant child. Did such a child really understand this kind of things between men and women? Moreover, she was just a child. How could she be so unbearable in the mouth of Chin Yuru's servants? It was really unbelievable. Thinking about it carefully, everyone actually understood the twists and turns in the story, but they did not think about it at first. Some people's eyes became sarcastic. Looking at the expressions of the people around her, Chin Yuru was so angry that she almost crushed the handkerchief in her hand and could hardly keep the gentle smile on her face. At this time, she also came to realize that if she had known this, she would have found a way to stop Chin Wanru. At this age, Chin Wanru was about to lose her virginity. If she let Chin Wanru out when she was a little younger, others would think that the words she had secretly spread before were true. Big sister, I just arrived in the capital, and I don't know anyone. Why are you talking about me? Why do you all seem to know me? Chin Wanru blinked her beautiful eyes and smiled at Chin Yuru, as if she did not know that she had successfully caused many misses to doubt Chin Yuru. Feeling the sarcasm in Chin Wanru's eyes, Chin Yuru became more and more annoyed, and her hand that was rubbing the handkerchief became stiff. But she had to show a trace of a hypocritical smile, and said with a forced smile, It happens that second sister has just arrived in the capital, and many misses are curious about the misses who grew up in Jiangzhou. Big sister, are you talking about Sister Rongji? Qin Wanru continued to ask in confusion, as if she did not see the cold anger in Qin Yuru's eyes. Who is Sister Rongji? Someone could not help but ask curiously. She is big sister's best friend, Miss Qi, who used to be the daughter of the magistrate of Jiangzhou. Now she also came to the capital with us, and she is living in our mansion. Qin Wanru explained with a smile. Although she was beautiful, almost all the misses present looked older than her, so they were not hostile to her. After all, she was still too young, and a girl without virginity was just like a child. She could not arouse the jealousy of the same sex, especially when she raised her little face with a bright smile. It was easy to win people's favor. Not only these misses, but also several childs from aristocratic families felt that the previous words were nonsense. Is first Miss Qi the younger sister of the first young master of the Qi family that Miss Qin mentioned before? A miss thought and asked. Then it means that it is about the marriage? Second Miss Qin, do you know first young master of the Qi family? A miss could not bear it anymore, so she lowered her voice and asked. Yes, I do. Not only brother Tianyu, but also brother Baiyu and sister Rongshi. Big sister and I grew up with them, and we even. Qin Wanru seemed to think of something when she said this, and quickly stopped talking. She reached out to hold Qin Yuru's hand affectionately. Big sister, let's go. Qin Yuru looked like she had no grudge with Qin Yuru, and they were sincere sisters, but it also made the words that Qin Yuru deliberately spread more suspicious. Qin Yuru was so angry that her face turned red, and she subconsciously slammed her hand hard to shake off Qin Wanru's hand. Everyone was stunned, and then they understood. Before, Qin Yuru had always pretended to dote on her extremely bad sister in front of others, but now it seemed that not only was her words not true, but it was also intentional. This first Miss Qin from Jiangzhou did not seem to be as kind as she appeared. And this so-called faint rumor about Jiangzhou should not be true, or it had something to do with first Miss Qin herself. Some sensitive people had already thought that when the daughter of Magistrate Qi appeared in the future, they could inquire about this matter. Chapter 142. It happened so suddenly that everyone had no time to react. Qin Wanru subconsciously wanted to hold something. She wrapped a piece of cloth around her wrist and pulled it hard. Someone reached out and pulled her. She staggered a little and then stood firm. Di Fenglan, what do you mean? The woman who stood beside Qin Wanru and reached out to pull her was a bright girl. She was dressed in red like a flower, which made her face extremely outstanding. Although the bright red color was a little gaudy, it made people feel refreshed. At this time, she held Qin Wanru's hand with one hand and looked at a woman beside Qin Yuru with unkind eyes. The woman was dressed in a colorful peacock blue skirt with gold brocade, which was extremely eye-catching, but there was a little arrogance and disdain between her eyebrows. Glancing at Qin Wanru and the woman in red, she pulled up her sleeves and patted them gently. Then she raised her eyes arrogantly and said in a sharp voice, Yen Shulan, I accidentally fell down. What does it have to do with you? What makes you so angry? What's the matter? Do you dislike me? It was she who hit Qin Wanru with her whole body just now. Looking at the fence behind her, Qin Wanru's eyebrows flashed a trace of hostility. There happened to be a gap between the two sections of the fence. If Yen Shulan did not hold her just now, she would fall directly. Di Fenglan, this is not your Duke Yong's mansion. Don't think that others can't do anything to you. Yen Shulan said coldly. Yen Shulan, what do you want to do? You don't have to be like this if you dislike me. Qin Wanru didn't say anything, but you defended for others and argued with me. What do you mean by this? Di Fenglan said and glanced at Qin Wanru arrogantly with a disdainful face. Yen Shulan was so angry that her face turned red. But she did not see clearly just now, and she did not know Qin Wanru. Since Qin Wanru did not speak, she really had no right to say anything. She turned to Qin Wanru and said, Miss Qin, tell us if she deliberately pushed you just now. Don't be afraid. Tell us and we can all testify. Her words made everyone's eyes fall on Qin Wanru. Countess Yong proudly withdrew her gaze from Shui Ruolin and also fell on Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru was just a child who came from a small place in the countryside. Although she did not speak, her eyes were full of contempt, which was the same as Di Fenglan's. She didn't believe that Qin Wanru dared to say anything at this moment. So what if she bullied her? Qin Yuru didn't say anything. A trace of complacency flashed in her eyes, but she pretended to be at a loss. At this moment, she just stood there blankly and didn't know what to do. There were all kinds of looks in people's eyes. Some were sympathetic, some were gloating, and some just wanted to watch the fun. Di Fenglan and Yen Shulan could talk like this in Great Elder Princess's mansion, but it didn't mean that others could. Zhao Di and Zhao Yen in the Imperial Palace could be regarded as the Emperor's favorite concubines. Given their identities, Great Elder Princess would definitely think highly of them. This was also the reason why they dared to quarrel here. But why did Qin Wanru? Everyone could almost imagine that she would put on a look of obedience, or pretend to be magnanimous and indifferent. She pushed me on purpose. Qin Wanru raised her head and her eyes fell on Di Fenglan. Then, when Countess Yong's face slightly changed, Qin Wanru raised her head and looked at Di Fenglan in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. After saying that, she also turned her eyes to the gap. There was a slope covered with pebbles from this position, so she must be seriously injured. Miss Di, you are Big Sister's cousin and Madame's niece. This is the first time we meet, right? I don't know what I have done to offend you. Did I quarrel with you when I was young, so that you hate me so much? Qin Wanru slightly tilted her head and looked Di Fenglan up and down with a bit of childishness and confusion. The beginning part of these words was very fierce, but in the conclusion part, it could be heard that it was just a child's complaint. The confusion in her big black and white eyes revealed Qin Wanru's mood at this time very well, as if she really thought that Di Fenglan was narrow-minded and bore a grudge because of something she didn't know when she was young. If it was really this kind of thing, how could she bear a grudge? However, if it was not because of this reason, it was really because of Qin Yuru. At this time, how could others not understand? Everyone was silent at first, and then they burst into laughter. Yen Shulan on the side also laughed so hard that she couldn't stand up straight. This answer didn't sound very sharp, but everyone understood the meaning of it. Their eyes were full of contempt when they looked at Qin Yuru and Di Fenglan. Di Fenglan's face turned blue and white. Her face turned cold and she shouted at Qin Wanru, "Nonsense!" Then Miss Di, can you tell me why you are so hostile to me? Qin Wanru said unhurriedly, without a trace of humility when she looked up. This question made Di Fenglan speechless and unable to say a word. Well, Fenglan, if you don't go there, Elder Princess will be anxious. Countess Yong glanced at Qin Wanru coldly and helped her daughter out of trouble. Yes, mother. Although Di Fenglan was very unwilling, she also knew that she should not argue with Qin Wanru at this time. She secretly gritted her teeth and followed Countess Yong forward. You are so young but you have a sharp tongue. When Countess Yong passed by Qin Wanru, she slightly stopped, squinted at her, and said coldly, "Thank you for your compliment, madam. I am not as good as your daughter." Qin Wanru leaned sideways, and then said leisurely, directly rebutting Countess Yong with one sentence. Her voice was neither too loud nor too low. Not only Countess Yong heard it, but also the people around could hear it. Although no one said anything, the meaning in her words was a little unpleasant. Countess Yong had always been arrogant in aristocratic families. Being rebuked by Qin Wanru like this, she was embarrassed for a while. She suddenly stopped, turned her eyes from Qin Wanru to Shui Rulin, and snorted coldly, like mother, like daughter. If she argued with Qin Wanru, it would be like bullying the weak, so she directly targeted Shui Rulin. Her words caused a commotion among the people around. Everyone turned their eyes to Shui Rulin, looked her up and down, and secretly had many bad conjectures. Countess Yong's words really made people feel quite suspicious. Could it be that this woman had a bad character? Shui Rulin actually wanted to come over and speak for Qin Wanru, but was stopped by Qin Wanru. At this time, hearing Countess Yong's words, Shui Rulin looked up at Countess Yong, bowed politely, and then raised her head to look at Countess Yong, and said directly, "Madam, do you have any dissatisfaction with me?" "Madam, what does my mother have to do with you?" Do you know my mother? Or do you know that my mother compromised to marry my father to take care of me? Do you think that my mother didn't teach me well because I didn't compromise like my mother just now? Qin Wanru also raised her head to look at Countess Yong with a confused face, as if she didn't understand what Countess Yong meant. She looked like a child, but pretended to be an adult, and looked at Countess Yong as if Countess Yong was making fun of her rudely. Such an extremely incongruous look fell into the eyes of everyone, and immediately made them laugh again, and looked at Countess Yong with no respect before. Countess Yong couldn't keep her face, and her eyes moved from Shui Ruolin to Qin Wanru. She snorted coldly and was about to say something. With her identity, even if she forced Qin Wanru once, others could not say anything. Some discerning people in the crowd sighed for Qin Wanru. After all, she was a child who was not very sensible and made Countess Yong angry. Then she would definitely not end well, and not only her, but also her mother. An old maid suddenly squeezed in from outside the crowd. Seeing Qin Wanru here, she gasped and came over to salute. "Second miss, why did you suddenly disappear? I just looked for you for a long time, but I didn't find you. Please come with me, Great Elder Princess is still waiting for you." After saying that, she reached out to the side, which meant that she wanted to lead Qin Wanru away. "Thank you, Nanny." Qin Wanru smiled slightly, and her eyes flickered. She walked to Shui Ruolin and said softly, "Mother, let's go there quickly." She had long known that the old maid who led the way couldn't really ignore her affairs, so she said such harsh words to Countess Yong at the first time. Along the way, she had seen clearly that she was the only one who was led along the way, and it could be seen that and Great Elder Princess really attached importance to her. It happened suddenly, and the old maid had no time to save her. But it had happened for a while, and if she still didn't react in time, she was really too stupid. And this time was just the right time. She wanted to let people know that Countess Yong and Shui Ruolin didn't get along well, and secretly pointed out that Shui Ruolin married into Qin's mansion because of her, not because she had an affair with Qin Huaiyong. There was nothing in this world that could not be leaked. If there was a little gossip about Shui Ruolin in the future, Madame D and Duke Yong's mansion behind her would make a big fuss, so it was better to leak some information first. She didn't want Qin's mansion to be too close to Duke Yong's mansion. At present, with the matter of Di Fenglan just now, she simply pulled away the veil of tenderness from Duke Yong's mansion, and let people know that Qin Yuru and Madame D, and even Duke Yong's mansion behind Madame D, were hostile to her mother, so that Countess Yong wouldn't play tricks when she had to go to the banquet of Marquis's mansion of Fengyang in the future. If there was one, there would be another. Di Fenglan was a person who refused to suffer losses, and could find something to make trouble. Could she really bear it today? He just had to wait for her to come. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, Shui Ruolin nodded and turned to leave with Qin Wanru. She looked weak, but not frivolous. When she looked at people, she was dignified and decent. Even if some people were a little more suspicious of her because of Countess Yong's words, at this time, seeing her dignified behavior, their doubts disappeared. As for Qin Wanru, she still retained her childish side and was also a person without scheming. Originally, no one knew which family Qin's mansion was. Now, seeing Qin Yuru and Countess Yong, many people had already found out that they were from Ningyuan Army General's mansion in Jiangzhou, which was also the family that Madame D married. Some madams who knew what had happened at that time looked at Qin Yuru with a faint smile. They also vaguely knew some things at that time, but they didn't know whether it was true or not. Later, Madame D married far away, and this matter was gradually forgotten by most people. But now, after such a scene, many people remembered it. But there were also some people who paid attention to Ru and Great Elder Princess and didn't understand why Ru and Great Elder Princess specially summoned Qin Wanru. After looking at each other for a few times, they walked forward silently. Chapter 143. Mother. Di Fenglai had always been arrogant and thought that she was Zhao Di's favorite niece in the palace. She had never been ridiculed by a little girl. She stamped her foot. She said angrily, "Let's go." Countess Yong looked at Qin Wanru's petite figure and frowned. She seemed to be too hasty just now, and this little girl had the upper hand. Thinking of what Madame D had asked her before, she knew it was not good. Just now, everyone could see that her mansion was hostile to the mother and daughter. It seemed that she could only play it by ear. This little girl was powerful. No wonder Madame D had always been at a disadvantage. She had always been shrewd. Although Qin Wanru made her lose face, she calmed down after taking a rest. After walking with the crowd for a few steps, she even chatted with several madams on the side about some idle jokes. For a moment, she was full of laughter and didn't seem to be angry with Qin Wanru because of what had happened just now. She still looked calm. Di Fenglan twisted the handkerchief in her hand and walked behind Qin Yuru. She looked unhappy, but she also knew that this was not the time to talk. Although Zhao Di was favored, this was the mansion of and great elder princess, and it was not a place to be presumptuous. But she was really angry. She turned her head and wanted to say something to Qin Yuru. Suddenly, a little eunuch rushed out and shouted, make way," and rushed over. People all scattered to both sides. Di Fenglan reacted quickly. She turned her feet and hurriedly avoided him. But she didn't know whether it was because of a miscalculation or other reasons. The little eunuch bumped into her hand. He staggered 2 steps and subconsciously pulled Qin Yuru's hand beside her. Because of the heavy collision, the two of them rolled on the ground together. Sorry. Seeing that he bumped into Qin Yuru, the little eunuch only said a few words and ran away. Countess Yong was angry and wanted to ask someone to catch the little eunuch back, but was stopped by an old maid beside her who reached out and pulled her sleeve. A little eunuch was not a big deal, but the master behind him must be someone from the palace. It was normal for people from the palace to attend and great elder princess's banquet. Every time and great elder princess held a banquet, some of those young princes would always show up. Sometimes all of them would come. But no matter which one it was, Duke Yong's mansion couldn't afford to blame them. The servant girls and old maids hurriedly helped them up. Di Fenglan was fine. She fell on Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru was pulled to the ground by Di Fenglan and happened to be under Di Fenglan. Qin Yuru's wrists were immediately injured. When she turned her wrists over, 2 bloodstains appeared on them. She couldn't help but cry out in pain, and tears started to fall. How are your injuries? Is it urgent? Countess Yong stepped forward and reached out to hold Qin Yuru's hand. She carefully used a handkerchief to clean the pebbles stuck in Qin Yuru's white and tender hand and said with concern, "Aunt, it hurts." Qin Yuru cried. Not only were there 2 bloodstains on her wrists, but her palms also hurt. Her hands were seriously scalded before. Although she used the medicine given by the palace when she arrived in the capital city, it took a long time for her palms to recover. Now the scars were not obvious, but they were still there if one looked closely. The new skin was very tender, and at this time, her palms also hurt badly. "Yuru, why don't you go back to Duke Yong's mansion first? The doctors in the mansion are very skilled. Let's see your wounds first." Countess Yong said with concern. Yes. Although Qin Yuru was very unwilling, she had to nod with tears when she looked at her dirty and tattered sleeves. She lowered her head and wiped her tears. She was also a little angry with Di Fenglan. She finally entered and great elder princess's mansion and didn't know many noble madams, but Di Fenglan ruined her plans again and again. But in front of Countess Yong, Qin Yuru didn't dare to say this. She could only wipe her tears with grievance, looking extremely pitiful. "Mother, how about I?" Di Yen said with some distress. But before he finished his words, he was glared at by Countess Yong. Knowing that he made his mother angry again, he hurriedly lowered his head. The marriage between him and Qin Yuru couldn't be settled because Countess Yong was not very satisfied with Qin Yuru and wanted to choose another wife. He really wanted to marry Qin Yuru, but he was clever enough to know that if he insisted on protecting Qin Yuru at this time, it would inevitably make his mother feel disgusted. He could only stand aside helplessly and secretly look at Qin Yuru. So Countess Yong sent an old maid and a servant girl to escort Qin Yuru back to the mansion. When they got on the carriage, the pain in Qin Yuru's hand also eased. With a gloomy face, she ordered the carriage to go directly to Qin's mansion. She didn't intend to go to Duke Yong's mansion. She had something to discuss with Madame D. Just now, Qin Yuru clearly saw how her aunt glared at her cousin. It seemed that she should ask her mother to urge her maternal grandmother to settle the marriage between her and her cousin as soon as possible. Master, I bumped into two people at once. Not only the Miss of Duke Yong's mansion, but also the hypocritical sister of 2nd Mississippi, Xiao Xuanzi said with joy. In order to explain the scene just now, he deliberately made a few movements so that his master could understand the scene just now more clearly. Not bad. The lazy voice had a hint of laziness in it. Chu Luchen was sitting on an excessively wide wheelchair, leaning against it. His black hair was tied up high, and he was wearing a purple gold crown and a purple brocade robe. The black jade belt made his handsome face look even more like jade. His long eyelashes trembled twice, and his thin and colorless lips slowly curved into a smile, curling his lips. Although it was not a big smile, Xiao Xuanzi knew that his master was happy. Master, you didn't see that the first Miss of Qin's mansion cried when she was helped up. She cried very pitifully, but Child D couldn't have tender feelings for her. He wasted first Miss Qin's tenderness. Xiao Xuanzi didn't leave after bumping into them. Instead, he hid behind a big tree and saw the scene clearly. Now he came back to tease his master. How dare he bully 2nd Miss? Didn't he have the face to do so? 3rd brother, what are you laughing at? Why are you so happy? Chu Liuxin came out of nowhere, with some mud on his face. He didn't look like a prince who came to the banquet above board at all. It seemed that he had just come out of a dog hole. In fact, he was a little afraid to see Chu Luchen. In the past, he didn't dare to get close to Chu Luchen. But just now, he saw his 3rd brother smiling like a flower from a distance. He thought that his 3rd brother, who was like a sickly beauty, must be in a good mood now that something good happened, so he dared to come over to greet him. Chu Luchen closed his eyes and weakly leaned against the railing of the wheelchair. He waved his hand, and his handsome face immediately looked lifeless, as if it had lost its color. Xiao Xuanzi apologized to Chu Liuxin and laughed dryly. Your Highness, my master is not feeling well, so he can't play with you. Please forgive him. 3rd brother, are you okay? Chu Liuxin unconsciously lowered his voice and asked. Xiao Xuanzi shook his head gently, indicating that his master was fine, and then pushed the impatient Chu Luchen away. Looking at Chu Liuchen's leaving figure, Chu Liuxin's face fell. He squatted down unhappily and reached out to pull a weed on the ground. He looked very tired. Your Highness, we'd better go and change clothes quickly. If Great Elder Princess finds out that you secretly climbed into the dog hole again, she will go to the palace to complain. Xiao Liuzi, the little eunuch who followed him, knew that he was in a bad mood, so he also squatted down to persuade him. Why does 3rd brother keep ignoring me? I remember that 3rd brother and I used to be best friends, but now he doesn't even care about me. Prince Xian, who looked like a young boy, felt very wronged. He actually wanted to get close to Chu Luchen, but Chu Luchen had always been indifferent to him, and even left without saying a word. It didn't seem to be like this when he was young. Your Highness, Prince Chen's temper is a little indifferent. In addition, he is not in good health, so he doesn't have the energy to play with you. Maybe it's because he can't play, so he doesn't want to see you play happily. Xiao Liuzi comforted his master. His words reminded Chu Liuxin, and he felt a little better. He patted the dust on his clothes and stood up. Looking at Chu Liuchen's back as he walked away, a trace of malice flashed across the eyes of the young boy, who had been a little jumpy. In fact, he was not completely ignorant. The children who grew up in the palace were really naive. How could they grow up? There were so many children in the palace who didn't have time to grow up and talk to each other. Let's go and see if eldest brother and 2nd brother are here. Chu Liuxin said, turned around and walked out. He came the earliest. He had nothing to do after walking around, so he climbed out of a dog hole in the backyard of in Great Elder Princess's mansion. After walking around outside, he had nothing to do, so he climbed back in through the dog hole. Xiao Liuzi, who followed him anxiously, was panicked and afraid. A dignified prince actually climbed through the dog hole. If he was found by the palace, he would be skinned even if he didn't die. However, this little prince had never cared so much. Sure enough, a prince was not anxious about a eunuch. Now hearing that his prince didn't intend to make trouble anymore and wanted to put on the airs of a prince and travel with the other two princes, he felt at ease. Your Highness, please come with me. I saw Prince Yu's eunuch just now. Then let's go and see eldest brother first. Let's go. Chu Liuxin was hot-tempered again. He happily turned around and ran out with Xiao Liuzi. In fact, it was not that he had a particularly good relationship with Chu Liue. The main reason was that the second prince, Chu Liuzhou, was a headstrong and self-opinionated person. He often ordered his brother around. Chu Liuxin disliked the second prince, Prince Zhou, the most. Relying on the fact that he was the son of the empress, he felt that the throne would inevitably be left to him in the end. He had been disrespectful to his brothers a lot. It could be said that no one could intimidate Prince Zhou except for Chu Luqian. As the youngest son of the surviving emperor, Chu Liue also had a temper. It was enough for him to keep a close relationship with his second brother, Prince Zhou, verbally. Chapter 144. Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin followed the old maid through several winding corridors and came to a yard. The old maid entered the door to report while Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin waited in the corridor. After a while, the old maid let them in with a smile. Qin Wanru followed Shui Rulin and walked in with a straight face. There were a lot of maids and old maids around. They were arranged neatly in the two rooms, but they were silent. It could be sensed that the rules of and Grand Princess Mansion were not small. There were so many people in the room that only the sound of breathing could be heard. When they entered the room, Shui Rulin first bowed to and Great Elder Princess who was sitting on the couch in front of them. Qin Wanru also immediately stepped forward to bow to her. Sit down. And Great Elder Princess looked at Qin Wanru with a smile and waved to her. Qin Wanru took 2 steps forward and was about to salute again, but was stopped by and Great Elder Princess. Just sit here. And Great Elder Princess pulled Qin Wanru to the front, and Nanny Gao hurriedly moved a small stool over. Qin Wanru sat on the stool in front of and Great Elder Princess's feet, which looked very intimate. What's wrong? Did you quarrel with the miss of Duke Yong's mansion? And Great Elder Princess had already known what had happened just now, so she asked with a smile. Qin Wanru's little face fell, and her black eyes flickered, but she still nodded honestly and did not defend herself. The young miss of your family doesn't like you? And Great Elder Princess reached out and touched Qin Wanru's beautiful hair. She felt that she really liked this child. Her well-behaved and honest look was also pleasing to the eye. I am not born by Big Sister's mother, and I have no blood relationship with Duke Yong's mansion. Qin Wanru lowered her head and looked a little depressed. Who is your biological mother? And Great Elder Princess tilted her head and looked at Shui Rulin, feeling that it was not likely. I don't know who my birth mother is. Qin Wanru lowered her head even more. From the angle of and Great Elder Princess, she could only see the top of her head. Why not? An Elder Princess asked in surprise. It was normal to say that the biological mother was someone else. Many men put the children of other women under the name of their first wife in order to give their children the title of lineal descent. But I really don't know. It seems that no one mentioned my birth mother. Qin Wanru shook her head and said bitterly, Madam Qin, why can't we mention the child's biological mother? And Great Elder Princess obviously understood the other meaning. She turned to Shui Rulin and asked in confusion. Great Elder Princess, I really don't know. I wasn't in Qin's mansion before. Shui Rulin said with a little shame. Won't the people in the manor talk about this, madam? Ruan Great Elder Princess increasingly felt that there was something wrong. How could it be possible that no one even mentioned the child's biological mother, unless someone deliberately said so? I didn't know that I had a biological mother before. I always thought that my biological mother was Madame D. But Madame D hurt me again and again, so I couldn't help but investigate it. Only then did I know that Madame D was not my biological mother, so she wholeheartedly put the blame on me for the sake of Big Sister. Qin Wanru said bluntly. Her voice was not high, and the girl's voice was a little aggrieved, but it was enough for and Great Elder Princess to hear clearly. This child is another one who has no one to love. And Great Elder Princess sighed and looked listless. And Great Elder Princess, who originally looked young, seemed to be a few years older in an instant. Princess, such a child is sensible. You can see that second Miss Qin is sensible at first glance, and her temper is better than that of ordinary misses from aristocratic families. Nanny Gao's words were very meaningful. Qin Wanru blinked and seemed to be aware of something, but she didn't grasp it for a while. I hope how is the same. Ring. And Great Elder Princess sighed again and reached out to touch Qin Wanru's beautiful hair. This child is obedient, but it's a pity that she has no mother to take care of her. Great Elder Princess, I have a mother now. She is very good to me. It is also because of me that she married my father. Originally, she wanted to be a monk. Qin Wanru raised her head and looked at Shui Rulin with a smile. A small face with a bright smile. Thinking of this child's life experience, people felt more and more pitiful. And Great Elder Princess increasingly felt that this child was pleasing to the eye, and even Shui Rulin was pleasing to the eye. Originally, she invited Shui Rulin here just because Qin Wanru brought her here. At this time, when she heard that Shui Rulin married into Qin's mansion, she secretly nodded to Shui Rulin. Shui Rulin's temperament was calm. For so many years, she had been in the backyard of Qin's mansion. She rarely contacted others and was not good at talking. But she just sat quietly on the side with a gentle appearance. Anyone would think that she was a person with a good temper. If you have any problem in the future, you can come to me. And Great Elder Princess said to Shui Rulin with a smile. Although Qin Wanru didn't say much, and Great Elder Princess naturally understood the meaning in her words. She immediately knew that Shui Rulin married into Qin's mansion for some reason. Thinking that Shui Rulin married into Qin's mansion because she wanted to take care of Qin Wanru, and Great Elder Princess couldn't help but feel a little more pity for her. Thank you, Great Elder Princess. Shui Rulin stood up excitedly and bowed deeply to and Great Elder Princess again. Although she was not good at communicating with others, she knew that Great Elder Princess intended to help her. Originally, she had no foundation and only relied on Madame Dowager. Now if and Great Elder Princess was willing to stand on her side, it was absolutely a great support. She also understood that this was and Great Elder Princess's greatest kindness to her. Princess, it's almost time. Do you want to go out and talk with several old madams who rarely come out? Seeing that Great Elder Princess's mood improved a little, Nanny Gao smiled and looked at the sky outside and suggested, Has the one from Duke Xing's mansion come? And Great Elder Princess nodded and was about to get up. But when she got up, she paused and her face darkened. Nanny Gao knew the knot in her master's heart. She immediately smiled and avoided the topic that could make and Great Elder Princess unhappy. Your Highness, your favorite master Hao is also here. Really? Where is he? And Great Elder Princess looked excited. She reached out and patted the armrest of the chair beside her. Come on, bring him here. Let me have a look. I'm afraid he is still outside. He can't come here if he wants to. Nanny Gao said vaguely. Humph, it's that old woman again. Didn't she deny it at that time? Now she holds him tightly. If not. Speaking of this, and Great Elder Princess's face was a little red. Obviously, she was very angry. Let's go. I'll go to see Hao myself. I want to know how he has been recently and whether anyone has bullied him. Saying this, and Great Elder Princess stood up. It's still early now. You can go to the garden and stroll around. I'll ask someone to find you later. And Great Elder Princess walked 2 steps angrily. Suddenly, she thought of Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin and turned back to tell them. Yes, Great Elder Princess. Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin stood up together and respectfully saw Great Elder Princess leave. After and Great Elder Princess left, Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin casually looked around in the garden. There were many madams and misses who looked around along the way. Shui Rulin was tired after walking for a while. Qin Wanru found a pavilion for her to sit and rest. She didn't feel tired. She had climbed over the wall many times in Qin's mansion before, so she had good physical strength. She didn't feel tired after walking for a while. Instead, she continued to walk forward with great interest. Yujie was also not tired. Her physical strength was originally different from ordinary people. Now she also found it interesting to watch. The princess's mansion was magnificent and beautiful, so the master and servant walked farther and farther. Unconsciously, they walked farther and farther away from the crowd. After passing another moon cave door and turning around an exquisite rockery, Qin Wanru looked up at the osmanthus trees planted against the wall. The osmanthus trees were fragrant, and little yellow flowers fell on the grass below. There was also a shrub that was half a person's height, and several stones were scattered there. Even if it was just a small corner of the courtyard, it was full of different charm and great ingenuity. "Hey, who are you? Pull me." Qin Wanru was fascinated by it. Suddenly, she heard a child's voice in her ear. She couldn't tell whether it was a boy or a girl, but she knew it was a child. She couldn't help lowering her head in surprise and looking around. When she came here just now, she didn't see any child. "Where are you looking?" "Here." "Don't you have eyes?" "I'm here." "Can you see me?" The voice seemed to be a little louder and a little angry. Qin Wanru walked in the direction of the voice in astonishment and saw a fair-skinned boy lying in the grass behind the shrub. He was about 6 or 7 years old and had a pair of big blinking eyes, which made people feel that he was cute. However, his face was sullen at this time, and he was not very polite when he saw Qin Wanru coming over. "Come and pull me, I want to come over." The little boy patted the grass beside him and said impatiently. Qin Wanru took a closer look and found that the boy was not lying in the grass, but seemed to come over from the hole in the wall, but was stuck here. Looking at the high wall and the boy who was stuck, Qin Wanru couldn't help laughing out. "Hey, what are you laughing at? Be careful, or I'll tell Grandma and beat you to death." The boy blushed, gritted his teeth and glared at Qin Wanru with a ferocious look. He even patted the grass hard with his hand, like a lively little beast, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, but with little strength. "How can you be so rude?" Qin Wanru squatted down with a smile and said, "It's none of your business. Who are you in my family? It's none of your business." The boy's face suddenly became gloomy, and he stared at Qin Wanru angrily like a fighting rooster. "Hey, how can you talk like this? Our miss is talking to you nicely. How can you be so rude? Which family's upbringing is so bad?" Yujie also came over. Seeing it was a beautiful and lovely child, she also teased him. Chapter 145. His words were arrogant and overbearing. Even if the child had a pleasing and beautiful little face, it would still make people feel disgusted. The stone slid past Qin Wanru's ear. Qin Wanru didn't expect that such a beautiful child would suddenly hit someone so impulsively. She was caught off guard for a moment and only felt that the wind blew past her ear. She reached out and touched her earlobe, feeling some dull pain. The stone must have hit her earlobe. Yujie came over to have a look and screamed in shock, "Miss, your ear is bleeding." The white and tender earlobe turned red, and there was a small wound, from which blood slowly dripped. Qin Wanru pressed the handkerchief to her earlobe, still smiling. "Why are you so fierce?" Although the boy was arrogant before, he didn't mean to hit her. Suddenly he hit her, which seemed more like a bluff. "It's none of your business." Looking at Qin Wanru's hand holding the handkerchief, the boy felt a little guilty. He swallowed and subconsciously retorted, with a trace of arrogance flashing in his eyes. "Well, then I don't care. You can be stuck there." Qin Wanru stood up and looked around. "No one will come here. The banquet of the princess's mansion is about to begin, and no one may come in a short time. Moreover, this place is very remote, and maybe it will be like this at night. This place is very unclean. Who knows if something will come out at night?" After saying this, Qin Wanru looked at the child who was panic-stricken and trying to hide his fear with pity. She curled her lips and deliberately showed a frightened expression. "Yujie, we'd better go quickly. Don't let something unclean come out and eat people. I heard that this kind of thing is most suitable to eat children." "Miss, I'm also scared after hearing what you said. This is not it, is it?" Yujie opened her mouth to cooperate and reached out to point at the boy on the ground. She was trembling all over. The child who was stuck inside was afraid. Although he had been trying to hide his fear and not let others find out his emotions, his nervous eyes narrowed tightly. However, he still narrowed his eyes nervously and stubbornly refused to ask for help. He just bit his lips so hard that his lips turned pale. Seeing that Qin Wanru and Qin Yuru were really going to leave, he shouted, "If you don't pull me out, I will beat you to death when I get out." "Ah, that's great. I wonder if you're still here when we come to see you tomorrow." Yujia turned her head and looked him up and down. Then she blinked at him proudly and continued to walk forward, ignoring him. The two of them, one in front and one behind, did not stop and disappeared behind the moon cave door. The sound of the wind rustling the leaves could be heard, sweeping the ground to reveal an empty space. Then, the wind blew against the wall, making a strange sound. In this quiet corner, it was especially frightening. The boy didn't feel afraid when he didn't think about it, but now he was sobbing. Tears fell down and he couldn't help biting his lips. He murmured, "Sister, sister, come quickly. Come and save How. How? I won't dare to be fierce anymore. Come and save How." He tried to struggle forward, but his little body had been stuck there and could not get out. The more he thought about it, the more scared and panicked he became. His little sobs turned into cries and his face turned pale. He looked at the place where Qin Wanru disappeared and tried to reach out. "Sister, come and save me. Sister, come and save me." He looked so pitiful and did not have any domineering manner just now. "Do you still curse?" Qin Wanru suddenly appeared at the moon cave door, blinked her big black eyes and asked, "No, I won't curse anymore. Sister, save me." The hostility on the boy's face had long disappeared. At this time, there was only a surprise when he saw Qin Wanru suddenly appear. He kept shaking his head, looking as pitiful as an abandoned child, and no longer the overbearing and annoying look he had before. Even Yujia, who had a lot of opinions against him, could not help standing on his side at this time. She called, "Miss," and seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. Qin Wanru came over and still squatted beside the boy. Her big bright eyes were filled with a gentle smile. "You really won't curse or hit people casually?" "I won't curse or hit people." The boy nodded repeatedly. "Are you obedient?" Qin Wanru reached out her handkerchief and carefully wiped the dust on the boy's face and asked, "Yes, sister, how is obedient?" The boy nodded repeatedly. His big watery eyes seemed to be able to speak, and he kept nodding. After wiping his face clean, she found that the boy was really very good-looking, like a jade sculpture. Seeing that he became well-behaved and sensible, Qin Wanru looked at the place where he was stuck. In fact, the hole was not small, but because there happened to be a protruding brick at the opening, the boy climbed out carelessly and got stuck. After figuring this out, Qin Wanru asked Yujia to break off the protruding brick under the boy, and then carefully pulled the boy out with Yujia. After the boy was pulled out, Qin Wanru took him to sit in the corridor on one side, and cleaned the dust and mud on his hands with a handkerchief. "Where are the people around you?" It was impossible for such a small child to come out to play alone. Judging from his clothes and the words just now, she knew that this child was not a child from an ordinary family. Moreover, today was the banquet of and great elder princess, and the people who came were not ordinary people. Just now the wet nurse was still here. Then I wanted to go into the hole. She said she would get some food for me. Then she disappeared. The boy had cried a lot just now, and he still couldn't stop now. He sobbed, and his tender little face was wrinkled into a ball. Qin Wanru frowned. The wet nurse was so careless to leave such a small child to play, and she even ran to get food by herself. Speaking of this, it was really weird. Why did you think of going into the hole? But she didn't know the background of this boy, and it was not good to investigate the affairs of other people's mansions, so she changed the topic and asked curiously. I saw Prince Xen drilling a hole. He went out and then came back. It was very fun." The boy's hand was still held in Qin Wanru's. She carefully cleaned his fingers one by one. The boy sat beside her obediently, sobbing and answering obediently. I saw Prince Xen drilling a hole." "Prince Xen going into the dog hole? Is it this hole?" Qin Wanru's face became strange. "He did go into the hole and I saw it." But not this. The wet nurse said that it was a hole to go out. This hole is in the mansion and it is safer. The boy replied, and reached out to gently push Qin Wanru. He blushed and shyly said, "Sister, do your ears still hurt? How I was not good just now." He felt that he liked this older sister. This older sister was very gentle and would play with him. She would also carefully wipe his hands and face. In the past, these were all done by the servants in the mansion. But even the servants in the mansion would sometimes just carelessly wipe his hands for him, saying that it would get dirty in a while. "I'm fine, it doesn't hurt too much." "How? Oh, don't worry. I want to ask you, why did you go to such a remote place?" Qin Wanru felt funny and touched the boy's soft hair, feeling soft in her heart. This was actually a lovely child, but she didn't know why this child pretended to be so overbearing and arrogant, but in fact, this child was soft-hearted. If the stone was really going to hit her, it should be thrown in front of her, and the target would be more obvious, but the stone was obviously to the side. The wet nurse told me that there were few people here and that there might be something fun to do. I happened to see Prince Xen sneaking around, so I followed him here. Later, he left and only the wet nurse and I were left. The boy said eloquently, "Where are the adults in your family? Why do they feel at ease to let a wet nurse take you away, but what about the others around you?" Qin Wanru always felt that there was something wrong. If this wet nurse really had bad intentions, it was very easy to get into trouble. And now it seemed that this wet nurse was really not good, and it seemed that something was wrong. "How has no parents?" The boy's head drooped down. He pursed his lips and blinked his big eyes. His eyes were red again, but he was trying his best not to cry. He wanted to show a strong smile on his face, but the smile was even sadder than crying. Qin Wanru sighed in her heart, reached out to hold the child in her arms, and gently patted his back. The boy suddenly sobbed again, stretched out a pair of chubby little hands to hold Qin Wanru like an octopus, and buried his head in Qin Wanru's arms. It turned out that he was a child without parents. No wonder even the wet nurse had bad intentions. Inexplicably, it occurred to Qin Wanru that she also had no parents. She reached out her hand and gently patted the boy's back, feeling very pitiful. Indeed, she was not the only child without parents in the world. She didn't know which family's child was like her. The people in Ru and Great Elder Princess's mansion were in a panic because Great Elder Princess's grandson was missing, and it was said that this matter was related to Prince Xen. Immediately, Prince Xen was summoned to the backyard. After Ru and Great Elder Princess interrogated him personally, she followed Chu Liuxin to the dog hole in the back wall, but there was still no one there. And Great Elder Princess was so anxious that she almost fainted. Chu Liuxin had no choice but to personally walk through the dog hole to find people outside. This kind of thing was originally okay to do in private, but now it was in public. Needless to say, after returning to the palace, he would definitely be punished. At the thought of this, Chu Liuxin felt that this was an unexpected disaster. The little bun of Ru and Great Elder Princess was so annoying. How could he learn this kind of thing from her? Next time, she would find a chance to beat this guy severely. Last time when she saw him, she thought he was cute, so she specially gave him her favorite new kuju. Not to mention that Chu Liuxin was angry, the whole mansion was also in a mess, while Qin Wanru was holding the child and dozing off. In fact, Qin Wanru was not sleepy, but the boy cried and fell asleep in her arms. Qin Wanru was not strong enough to hold the chubby boy, and he held her tightly. She was afraid that she would wake him up, so she had no choice but to lie down in the corridor and doze off. Yujia wanted to reach out and hold the child, but Qin Wanru did not allow it, so she could only wander around in boredom. Not far from them, a servant girl suddenly appeared. It seemed that she was also surprised to see Qin Wanru here. Seeing that Qin Wanru was holding a child in her arms, she hurriedly hid. After a long time, the servant girl reappeared, looked around furtively, and dropped a piece of paper on the ground. There were a few words on the paper. Qin Wanru, child. Chapter 146. The remote corner was really remote. After waiting for a long time, the child's wet nurse still didn't appear. Chin Wanru could basically be sure that the wet nurse had deliberately disappeared. Seeing that it was almost time, she patted the child on the back and whispered, "It's time to get up." The boy seemed to be sleeping very comfortably. He twisted his body, turned his head to one side, and continued to sleep with Chin Wanru in his arms. He looked very cute. Chin Wanru smiled and reached out to pinch his little nose, while continuing to call him. This time the boy couldn't sleep. He opened his watery eyes and looked at Chin Wanru with a little confusion. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. He blinked his big eyes and showed a well-behaved smile. He didn't look like a little bully at all. "Let's go to eat." Chin Wanru's hand fell from his nose and gently pinched his rough, white and tender little face. "Sister." The boy murmured and wiped his tears with the back of his hand. He was very well behaved. "Little master, do you want me to hold you?" Yujia also felt that she liked him very much and took the initiative to ask. The boy looked at Chin Wanru and then at Yujia. He hesitated and shook his head. "No, I want to go with you." After saying that, he jumped down and took Chin Wanru's hand to walk out. They then walked out together. They didn't know the way very well. After a few turns, Chin Wanru didn't know where she was. She didn't know where the banquet was held, so she could only continue to walk forward. Yujia suddenly saw a servant girl passing by the door of the moon cave on the left. She hurriedly ran over and stopped her to ask the way. After pointing in a direction, the servant girl hurried away. It seemed that she was in a hurry. She turned around and was about to leave. But when she saw the boy holding Chin Wanru's hand, she was shocked and stopped. "Master How?" The servant girl looked at the boy whose little hand was held, and then looked up at Chin Wanru. She tentatively called, "Miss Chin? Do you know us?" Chin Wanru stood still in shock. "I know Master How." The servant girl glanced at Chin Wanru cautiously and answered in a low voice. "Then how do you know that it's me with your Master How?" Chin Wanru tilted her head and looked at the boy. Seeing that he was also looking up at her with a blank face, she knew that the child did not know this servant girl. The whole mansion knows about this." The servant girl murmured. She squatted in front of the boy and stretched out her hand. "Master How, everyone is looking for you. You'd better go back with me to see Her Royal Highness." "Get out of my way. I want to go with Big Sister." The boy pushed the maid's hand away and looked at her warily. He looked like a little bully again. Why does the entire residence know about it? Chin Wanru had an intuition that something was wrong. It was a coincidence that she met this child. How could the whole mansion know it? The servant girl stood up, looked at Chin Wanru, and then looked at the boy as if she wanted to say something. "Sister asked you to say it, so just say it. Otherwise, I'll tell grandmother that you bullied me on purpose and even beat me." The boy straightened his back and became arrogant. He glared at the servant girl threateningly. It looked very fierce. However, with his small stature, white and tender skin, beautiful little face, and chubby hands and feet, he did not look very threatening. However, it was obvious that the servant girl on the opposite side fell for his trick. After hearing what he said, her face turned pale with fear. She hurriedly waved her hands. "Master How, I'll say it right away. You can't say that I bullied you. Tell me, what's going on?" Chin Wanru smiled slightly and squeezed the boy's hand. The fierce look on the boy's face immediately faded, and he looked like a well-behaved child again. The servant girl lowered her head and said timidly, "Everyone said that Miss Chin took Master How away. Someone saw you take him away on purpose." "I took him away?" Chin Wanru was puzzled. "I heard that Master How offended Miss Chin, and then you were angry. You didn't know Master How's identity, so you wanted to cheat Master How away and sell him." The servant girl looked at Chin Wanru and suddenly felt that this news was completely wrong. The miss in front of her looked not much older than Master How. How could she be so vicious? Just because Master How, who had a bad temper, threatened her, she wanted to cheat Master How away. "Tell me in detail." Chin Wanru heard something from his words. She thought of something and asked slowly. Seeing that Chin Wanru was not angry and still asked her in a soft and gentle voice, The servant girl calmed down, so she told her everything she knew. The child in front of her was Master Hao. This time, he came to attend in Great Elder Princess's banquet with the adults of his family. Originally, he was with everyone. Later, no one knew why the child ran away and disappeared. Everyone was so anxious that this matter was even reported to an Great Elder Princess. An Great Elder Princess ordered everyone to look for Master Hao. Unexpectedly, they didn't find Master Hao, but found a piece of shredded paper from nowhere. Originally, this kind of shredded paper was not so easy to be noticed, but the servant girl beside Master Hao said that the paper was folded by Master Hao in the past for fun. So this piece of paper was sent up. The paper had been shredded, and the words, Qin Wanru, child, were vaguely written on it. For a moment, everyone didn't know who was called Qin Wanru. They specially asked several misses with the surname Qin, but no one had this name. Later, they heard from the people of Duke Yong's mansion that the first Miss Qin of Ningyuan army general in Jiangzhou, who had just entered the capital, was called Qin Yuru. Then this Qin Wanru should be her sister. After that, the story became more and more mysterious. It said that many people saw this Miss Qin passing by, and it seemed that there was a child beside her. All in all, the final conclusion was that the second miss of the Qin family met Master Hao, the little overlord, on the road. Master Hao was overbearing, and his words might have offended the second miss of the Qin family. Therefore, the second miss of the Qin family had evil thoughts and tried to trick Master Hao into selling him. This matter was seen by a servant girl who could write. The servant girl was worried that she was alone, so she deliberately picked up a piece of paper dropped by Master Hao, hurriedly wrote 2 words, and then chased after him. Just after a while, the figure in front of her was gone. After listening to this story, Yu Jie was completely stunned. She looked at Qin Wanru and then looked at Master Hao, and didn't know what to say for a moment. How could she make up such a thing? She was so imaginative. Miss, this is too outrageous. Yu Jie was dumbfounded. Qin Wanru's face darkened. Such a ridiculous thing, such a ridiculous reason, but someone believed it. This was the result. Are you a servant girl in this mansion? A flash of lightning suddenly flashed in Qin Wanru's mind. That was the most critical part of this ridiculous thing. Her face immediately changed, and a trace of hostility flashed in her eyes. Because the cause of this thing was ridiculous, not many people believed it. But if the result was really like this, with the foreshadowing in front, how many people would believe her? If something really happened to Hao, these ridiculous remarks might become a fact. As long as Hao disappeared, all the points pointed to her, and the false would become true. The key was Hao's safety. Thinking about it, Qin Wanru immediately understood her situation and what she should do now. Yes, I am. Can you find a few more people right away? Be quick. Qin Wanru ordered. I came here with a few sisters just now, and they are beside me. Call them all here. Qin Wanru said. Sensing the unusual atmosphere, the servant girl nodded and did not dare to delay. She ran out and soon came back with 5 or 6 servant girls. Don't make a sound, follow me. Qin Wanru said. The group of servant girls nodded and followed behind Qin Wanru. It did not take long for Qin Wanru to return. Soon, Qin Wanru walked to the place where Hao went through the dog hole. Before she arrived, she faintly heard voices. It seemed that 2 people were talking anxiously. Why is he not here? He should be here. A young woman's voice said. Then why don't you find him quickly? The others sounded a little rough, which should be an old woman's voice. How about you find him here, and I'll look around. When you find him, go directly to the dog hole in the backyard. There is no one there now. Chapter 147. Okay. Miss, I don't know which mansion you are from, but this is Rui, in Great Elder Princess's mansion. Not everyone can catch me. The rough old maid said loudly. Seeing that Qin Wanru didn't intend to let her go immediately, she immediately struggled. However, Yu Jie held her with great strength and twisted her arms behind her back. Are you from Ru, in Great Elder Princess's mansion? Qin Wanru looked up and down at the old maid and looked at the tight clothes. The old maid was really a little thick. The old maid's servant girl of Ru, and great elder princess's mansion wrapped her tightly. She was probably uncomfortable, so the toggle and loop buckle on her neck was loosened, revealing the white underwear inside. This was an extremely undignified appearance. When Qin Wanru entered the door before, she had seen the rules of Ru and great elder princess's mansion. At that time, 2 rows of servants stood on the side, and so many people didn't make a sound. From this point, it could be seen that Ru and great elder princess also paid attention to the rules of her family. However, the old maid jumping in front of her not only looked unfitting but also messy. Today was Ru and great elder princess's banquet for guests. If such an old maid came out, she would lose the face of Ru and great elder princess's mansion. Yes, I am. If you don't believe me, you can ask Ru and great elder princess. The old maid couldn't move, so she didn't believe it and twisted again. While twisting, her face turned red, and she said loudly, "It was ridiculous to ask Ru and great elder princess for the sake of a lowly, rough old maid. How ignorant Qin Wanru was to do such a thing." Or the old maid also knew that Qin Wanru would not bother Ru and great elder princess for such a small thing. Until now, she just thought that Qin Wanru was just a miss who passed by here and meddled in other people's business. If she said something fierce, this miss would not dare to do more. Moreover, she seemed to be such a young Mississippi. How old was she? How could she meddle in other people's business? Even if she was caught, the old maid didn't panic much. She just struggled vigorously and cursed several servant girls around her. "Are you also from Ru and great elder princess's mansion?" Qin Wanru ignored the old maid who was stomping and cursing. She turned around and saw the pale and weak young woman. In fact, when they came out just now, Hao had already told Qin Wanru the identity of this woman. As Qin Wanru guessed, this woman was the wet nurse who left Hao alone. "I'm not," the wet nurse said timidly. Her face was so pale that she almost fainted. "Tell me, which manor are you from?" Qin Wanru looked at the wet nurse calmly, with the corners of her mouth slightly raised, and there seemed to be a trace of heart-palpitating sarcasm flashing in her eyes. "The wet nurse of the evil master?" His words completely shocked the wet nurse. Chapter 148. Your child needs to be taught a lesson. Di Fenglan said angrily as her hand was pinched by Yujia. She didn't notice that the young madams around her all took a step back and looked respectful. "It turns out that the child of our mansion will be sent to Duke Yong's mansion to learn from Miss Di." A cold snort came from behind. Di Fenglan was stunned for a moment. She also heard it clearly this time. She looked at Qin Wanru, who tightly pursed her lips, and turned her head hurriedly. She saw her and great elder princess surrounded by a large group of madams and young madams. She was so scared that she immediately withdrew her hand. She stammered, "Great elder princess." When Hao saw her and great elder princess, he released Qin Wanru's hand and rushed to Ru and great elder princess. "Grandma!" Seeing that her grandson was fine, and great elder princess relaxed her tense face and reached out to hold Hao in a hurry. "Grandma, they are going to sell me." When Hao rushed into Ru and great elder princess' arms, he immediately turned his head, pointed at the 2 tied people and complained. Ru and great elder princess held Hao in her arms, looked up at the 2 tied servants, and then turned to Qin Wanru's face. A smile slowly appeared on her face. Although others said so before, she didn't believe it at all. "Miss of Duke Yong's mansion?" Ru and great elder princess's eyes finally fell on Di Fenglan. "Great elder princess, this is my daughter." Countess Yong had to bite the bullet and come out. "You raised a good daughter who knows the rules. You even want to help me teach Hao a lesson." Ru and great elder princess nodded slightly with a cold smile. Di Fenglan couldn't bear the heavy words. She staggered and almost fell, but she reacted quickly. She simply took advantage of the fall and knelt down with a plop. She bowed her head with tears in her eyes and said, "Great elder princess, I didn't know that Master Hao is your grandson. I have offended you." No matter how arrogant Di Fenglan was, she didn't dare to be arrogant in front of Ru and great elder princess. "Humph. When great elder princess snorted and ignored her. Her eyes fell on the tired old maid again. The old maid's ill-fitting clothes were from the princess's mansion. Go and find out where this old maid is from. Yes, this old servant will look into it immediately. Gao Momo nodded and reached out to call a few servant girls over to call the stewards of each department. There were too many people in the Fu, and Gao Momo herself couldn't recognize all of them. Grandma, it was my sister who saved me. They were talking nonsense. It was my sister who caught the two bad guys. How? Hugged and great elder princess's neck and rubbed it against her. Grandma, no. Sister is a good girl. It's others who are bad. And great elder princess touched her grandson's head, and her heart became soft. Chapter 149. Miss Yen. Qin Wanru turned around and looked at Yen Shulan, who was walking towards her with a smile. Can we walk together? Yen Shulan said with a smile and pointed to a gravel path. Okay. Qin Wanru nodded. Anyway, she just wanted to walk around casually. At this moment, great elder princess was going to deal with her grandson's affairs, and other irrelevant people left in twos and threes. There were many people walking around casually, and most of them were talking about the disgrace of Duke Yong's mansion. It was really shameful to be despised and even driven away by Ru and great elder princess, and it also greatly weakened the reputation of Duke Yong's mansion. Second, Miss Qin, do you know who the child is? Yen Shulan inexplicably liked Qin Wanru, so she deliberately stayed to talk to her. Who is he? Qin Wanru was also quite curious. In her last life, she was ill-informed and didn't know much. She only vaguely heard some news from Qin Yuru and Madame D. As for what Hao said just now, she didn't quite understand it. He was the grandson of Ru and great elder princess, but why was he a fatherless child? Why was he framed? He is the son of Infanta Qinghua, the daughter of Ru and great elder princess, and the only legitimate son of the former heir of Duke Xing. Yen Shulan sighed and said, he is a poor child. Why is he a poor child? Qin Wanru frowned and felt that there was something wrong. With such a background, this child was destined to be extremely noble. How could he be pitiful? However, the former heir of Duke Xing seemed to remind Qin Wanru of something in her memory. The so-called former heir of Duke Xing was actually not the current Duke Xing, but the elder brother of the current Duke Xing. The former heir of Duke Xing married Infanta Qinghua, but old Madam of Duke Xing didn't like Infanta Qinghua, so the former heir of Duke Xing took Infanta Qinghua and left the capital city for the border. They left for many years. It seemed that because it was too far away, it was even inconvenient to send messages. Outsiders didn't know the specific details. Then, when the chaos broke out, the capital city sent people to look for them, and only Infanta Qinghua came back. This child is the posthumous child that Infanta Qinghua gave birth to. Infanta Qinghua lost her life when she was giving birth to the child and died early. Yen Shulan sighed and said, he was originally a proud son, but now he became an orphan without parents. I heard that although the current old madam is also good to this child, because she has a bad relationship with Infanta Qinghua, she doesn't care about this child very much. However, great elder princess loves this child very much. Joshua, Tauka. A picture suddenly flashed in Qin Wanru's mind. It was a very vague picture. A woman was holding her hand and seemed to be saying something to her, but she couldn't hear or see clearly. The one from Ning's family? Qin Wanru asked calmly. The reason why she asked this was that she remembered that in the last life, Dian seemed to have no intention of marrying Qin Yuru at first, but it seemed that something happened later, so Qin Yuru married Dian. But afterwards, this Miss Ning still followed him. Yes, she is a distant relative of Countess Yong's maiden family, and she is a cousin of Child Di. She is also good-looking, and I heard that she grew up with Child Di. Why didn't she marry Child Di? When I saw Ning Kaixian before, she said that they would get married. Yen Shulan said in confusion. This Miss Ning Kaixian was a niece of Countess Yong's maternal family. Although she was not a very close niece, Ning Kaixian was very good at talking, so Countess Yong liked her very much. She and Di Yen grew up together, and they had been friends since childhood. It was said that there had been an agreement between them. When the time was right, the marriage between the two families would be settled, and many people knew this. Then why didn't they settle it before? Qin Wanru still felt strange. Before, Ning Kaixian had to observe mourning for her grandfather, and her grandfather and Countess Yong's mother are biological siblings. Yen Shulan said, "How is Miss Ning's family?" Qin Wanru thought for a moment and asked. She always felt that there should be some reason for such a thing in the last life. Because this matter was directly related to Qin's mansion, Qin Wanru knew something. Ning's family is not bad, but it is not a big noble family. Marquis's mansion of Fengyang and Duke Yong's mansion have always taken good care of her family. Her father is just a small official. Yen Shufeng said, and then curled her lips. Usually she is good at pretending. She will make a big fuss if something is wrong. But the heir of Duke Yong likes her very much. But according to the heir of Duke Yong, I guess he will have tender and protective feelings for pretty girls. After finishing the previous words, Yen Shulan added maliciously, and then laughed. Qin Wanru pursed her lips and also laughed. For people who were familiar with Di Yen, it was really like that. He probably liked pretty girls and had tender and protective feelings for pretty girls. Does your mansion really want to unite with Duke Yong's mansion by marriage? Seeing Qin Wanru also smiled knowingly, Yen Fenglan felt that the two of them had the same mind, so she approached and asked. Madam D and Big Sister think so, but Duke Yong's mansion hasn't decided yet. Qin Wanru thought for a moment and said honestly. Oh, such a big playboy, but he can still be picky. They really think too highly of him. Yen Shulan said disdainfully. She rolled her eyes and suddenly said, Your big sister doesn't seem to be a good person. Chapter 150. This was Madame of Duke Xing. This woman seemed to have no contact with her in the last life, but she seemed to be everywhere. Qin Wanru even had an idea that her life in the last life seemed to be doomed when she met this Madame of Duke Xing. The feeling that her life was controlled by someone and pushed into the abyss step by step made her feel helpless and desperate, but she couldn't find out who the mastermind was. Unexpectedly, she met Madame of Duke Xing again here, much earlier than in the last life. In the last life, she didn't have the opportunity to attend Ru and Great Elder Princess's banquet, so she didn't see Madame of Duke Xing at the banquet. In the last life, some things that she couldn't see through suddenly became clear now. This woman was very dangerous. This was the conclusion given by the two lives. Madame of Duke Xing didn't look very good, but she didn't look angry or furious. Instead, she looked worried and even panicky. She was very good-looking. This worried look not only made her look calm as a madam of an aristocratic family, but also a little kind. Seeming to feel that someone was looking at them on the roadside, she raised her head and looked into Qin Wanru's eyes. Although she didn't recognize Qin Wanru, Yen Shulan knew her. Even though she was full of worries, she still bent her lips politely, then looked away and hurried away. When Madame of Duke Xing looked at her, Yen Shulan hurriedly stopped talking and bowed sideways. After Madame of Duke Xing left with her people, she breathed a sigh of relief and said, Don't you feel that Madame of Duke Xing is very imposing? It seems so. Qin Wanru replied calmly. I heard that she is the head of Duke Xing's mansion, and she controls the mansion in good order. She is a very capable person. First Miss of Duke Xing is also a dignified and gentle person. When I see her next time, I will introduce her to you. She is really a very good person, completely different from Di Fenglan. Yen Shulan introduced. Therefore, Xiao Yenru, the eldest daughter of lineal descent of Duke Xing's mansion, had always had a good reputation. With a sharp smile, she looked forward to seeing Xiao Yenshu again. When they arrived at the banquet hadn't started yet. Qin Wanru looked for Shui Ruolin and saw Qianghua waving from a distance. She parted with Yen Shulan and walked to Shui Ruolin. When she approached, she found that her table was very close to the main seat. It was in front of her. After sitting down beside Shui Ruolin, before she had time to speak to her, she saw the child who was originally sitting on the main seat, twisting his body, suddenly run down from his seat and ran towards her, sister. After calling out affectionately, he pounced on her. Qin Wanru hurriedly reached out to hold him and fell back. If Yujia hadn't reached out to hold her back, they would have fallen together. Young Master Hao, wait, be careful. A young woman rushed over anxiously. Chapter 151. How, do you want to protect Grandma and accompany her? When Grandma falls down, you can help her. She is old, and it is sad that no one accompanies her. Qin Wanru coaxed him when she saw that it was about time. Xiao Yuanhao thought for a while and nodded hard. I want to accompany Grandma forever. Grandma has so many people to accompany her, but Grandma has no one. It's so pitiful. Hao raised his watery eyes and looked at and Great Elder Princess sitting in the main seat. He inexplicably felt that and Great Elder Princess was more and more pitiful. He looked around and saw that people all stayed away from her and no one played with her. No, I have to accompany Grandma. I can't let anyone bully Grandma. Thinking of this, Xiao Yuanhao climbed down from the chair and ran to and Great Elder Princess. Before he reached her, he shouted, Grandma, I want to stay with Grandma from now on. I will stay with Grandma all the time. I will never go back. And Great Elder Princess was stunned at first and didn't understand what he meant. When she saw him rushing to her, she hurriedly hugged him. Thinking of the child's words, she was so excited that her eyes turned red. She had tried everything in vain, but she still couldn't make this child stay. She could directly take this child from Duke Xing's mansion, but she didn't want this child to cry and make a fuss. She didn't know what people of Duke Xing's mansion had said to this child. Every time this child came, he was eager to go back to the mansion. It seemed that he didn't want to stay here for a moment. In fact, and Great Elder Princess had been worried about Duke Xing's mansion. She always felt that her son-in-law's death outside might have something to do with the current Duke Xing, but she had no evidence. She really wanted to raise this only child by herself and didn't want to let him go back to Duke Xing's mansion. But the child didn't want to stay, and she couldn't force him. After all, this child's surname was Xiao in name. Now this child took the initiative to stay. How could and Great Elder Princess not be excited? She said yes repeatedly and reached out to touch Xiao Yuanhao's hair. Looking up at Qin Wanru, the smile on her face became more and more gentle. Of course, she knew that her grandson would not come here and say that for no reason. She did not expect that this child was so compatible with Qin Wanru. Now she found Qin Wanru more and more pleasing to the eye. What a coincidence! After hugging and Great Elder Princess, Xiao Yuanhao wriggled out of and Great Elder Princess' arms, ran to Qin Wanru, and sat beside her to eat. The young woman behind her seemed to be from and Great Elder Princess's mansion. And Great Elder Princess must have sent someone to follow Xiao Yuanhao because of what happened today. Many people knew Xiao Yuanhao. Chapter 152. Your Highness, shall we stop second Miss Qin on the way? Xiao Xuanzi really didn't dare to promise him at this time. In and Great Elder Princess's mansion, he really didn't dare to be presumptuous. But he was afraid that his master would do something willful, so he lowered his voice and said, No, it's too troublesome. Chu Luqian said without opening his eyes. Master, I heard that Master Hao of Duke Xing's mansion now lives in Great Elder Princess's mansion. Just now second Miss Qin also promised Master Hao that she would often come to see Master Hao, and Great Elder Princess also agreed. Xiao Xuanzi's eyes lit up and immediately reported. When will she come? Chu Liuqian's long eyelashes fluttered twice on his eyelids, and he finally stopped asking for her now. She said she will come in a few days. Xiao Xuanzi said, I'm not in good health recently, and I'm afraid to live alone in Prince Chen's mansion. I want to stay in Princess's mansion for a while. Chu Luqian smiled. His gentle and soft voice had a faint smile, and it could be heard that he was in a good mood. Yes, I'll go and tell First Princess later. Xiao Xuanzi secretly wiped his forehead. As long as he didn't go to find second Miss Qin immediately, these reasons could be used. Everyone knew that their master was capricious and did whatever he wanted, but for the sake of his illness, no one would say anything. Are they still there? After asking Qin Wanru's words, Chu Luchen raised his eyes, and his eyes became cold, as if there was a ghastly chill spreading out. The strange hostility condensed in his half-raised phoenix eyes, which made him look like a different person. He was no longer a sick and gentle handsome young man. Yes, they are still there. Xiao Xuanzi answered more carefully. Let them all go back. Chu Luchen waved his sleeves. Although his sleeves were soft, the coldness in his eyes showed that what he said was true. Send someone over and tell them that I have a headache and want to sleep for a while. Tell them not to make noise. I'll go and tell them now. Xiao Xuanzi blinked his eyes and said. He felt that it was better for him to say those words. Go. Tell them to hurry up. If I fall sick from exhaustion because they didn't rest well, I'll definitely complain to Imperial Uncle. Yes, I will go now. Master, please take a rest. Xiao Xuanzi nodded repeatedly. Chu Luchen closed his eyes again. His head rested on one side of the soft chair, and his body was covered with the blanket that Xiao Xuanzi brought for him just now. Xiao Xuanzi deliberately gathered the blanket. After checking that everything was in place, he turned around and went downstairs to the opposite pavilion. The guards downstairs knew him. When they saw him coming, they looked at each other and reached out to stop him. Our prince has something to tell the three princes. Xiao Xuanzi did not force his way in. A trace of coldness flashed in her watery eyes. Madame D and her daughter probably didn't expect that such a thing would happen after Qin Yuru left. What happened? Qin Huaiyong's face changed as expected and he asked anxiously. Nonsense, how could it be possible? Madame D screamed. Impossible. Qin Yuru stopped pretending to cry. She raised her head and stared at Qin Wanru fiercely, gnashing her teeth and said, Of course it's true. Now the whole capital city should know it. If you don't believe it, you can send someone out of the mansion to inquire about it. That's how Countess Yong was driven out. Shui Rulin proved on the side indifferently. How could and great elder princess drive my sister-in-law out? Don't talk nonsense. Looking at their calm appearance, Madame D became more and more uneasy, but she still said stubbornly. She didn't believe that such a thing would happen to her maiden family. Qin Huaiyong also didn't believe it, so he looked at Shui Rulin. I heard that it's related to the kidnapping of and great elder princess grandson. Shui Rulin answered. Is it true? Qin Huaiyong had to face this matter. If it was true, it would be a big deal for Duke Yong's mansion, which would inevitably affect the reputation of Duke Yong's mansion. It's true. Shui Rulin nodded affirmatively again. Father, I was also involved at that time. A note fell at the scene with my name on it. I haven't been in the capital city for a long time, but someone knew my name. Later, it was said that it came from Duke Yong's mansion. My mother and I didn't understand the details. Anyway, then great elder princess was very angry and drove Countess Yong away. Qin Wanru's eyes flashed and she explained in a very orderly way. Her words sounded vague, and she didn't directly refer to Duke Yong's mansion. But and great elder princess behavior gave everything reasonable evidence. As soon as she said this, Qin Huaiyong immediately believed her. He looked at Madame D, whose face turned pale, and angrily rebuked, What does Duke Yong's mansion want to do? If this kind of thing really involved Qin Wanru, it was equivalent to involving Qin's mansion. Qin Huaiyong's job had not been settled yet, and Qin Wanru's accident at this time would have a huge impact on his official career. Thinking about this, how could he not be angry? Madame D panicked. She didn't know why things turned out this way. It was certain that Countess Yong didn't like Qin Wanru, but how could she really make trouble in front of and great elder princess? In the end, she even asked and great elder princess to drive her out. After that, how could she make her sister-in-law bring Shui Rulin to the Marquis's mansion of Fengyang? What if he asked his sister-in-law to set a trap for Shui Rulin and make her lose her child? What was sister-in-law doing? Madame D was angry and hateful at the same time. She had always been a calm and collected person.